When would you say that you became unbothered?
When did I become unbothered? Listen, first of all, I'm extremely excited, totally fangirl to be on your show. When did I become unbothered? I went through so much shit that at some point it was either becoming unbothered or dying physically. Like not just mentally, not just being depressed, not just having anxiety, but literally knowing that when I was down to 99 pounds as a grown 35, I guess 36-year-old woman, that I was in serious danger because everything that everybody felt about all the things impacted me so much. One, I was very, very unaware of the idea that you couldn't just tell the truth and it make something go away. That even when I was being honest, I was trying to, have good integrity, and someone would say something to me, oh, you guys stole money from the Women's March. I'm like, no, we didn't. Never have we ever. And in fact, we got all the documents, we're showing it, proving, and still they would come up with ways to shift and twist and whatever. And then at some point I realized that, there's nothing I can say. There are just people out here who literally hate me. And it's nothing that I could do to ever defend or prove my righteousness in any situation. Certainly I'm not saying I'm just this righteous, perfect person. And so I just had to let a lot of things go, Jemele. Just let it go. And I think at that point I started to say, and especially it's going on a little long, but it's real. I was in rehab, and I remember sitting in a dark room where everybody had to, of course, at night, we would go to our rooms, and I was sitting in there thinking through my head, man, if people find out that I'm in rehab, if this happens, if, all this stuff, I had a whole PR plan in my mind for what to do if somehow it got released that I was away. I had all of these different ideas. And at some point in that room, in that space, for those days, I had to start coming to terms with the fact that, like, it just doesn't matter. All these things are making you crazy. And that's why we're here. And so I think that's when I decided to just be unbothered.
So you gave me quite a bit to follow up on in that answer. Yeah, it was. I appreciated the honesty that you shared there.
What did you go to rehab for?
I went to rehab for prescription medicine. I knew that Xanax specifically helped you to sleep and deal with anxiety. But when I went to my doctor to try to get a prescription for it, I can't remember that those years ago, but I think maybe I had a prescription for a short period of time. Yeah, I know I did. But I wasn't on it, right, forever. And one day somebody told me that, well, if you're going through all of this stress, you need to take Xanax. And I couldn't, of course, get it the right way. And so I just started getting it from whoever was already taking them. I was borrowing and, doing whatever I had to do. And one day I realized, and it wasn't just Xanax, any pill that you had that I thought could work, I would take. And, but Xanax was, of course, like the central issue. And then one day when I thought, okay, it's time for me to get off of, I'm good now. Like things have calmed down. The stress is not the same. And I said, okay, let me try to go and just stop taking it and start resting on my own. I was literally sick, like physically, I couldn't stop. And that's when I realized I had an addiction. And even after that, I still took it for a while because, it wasn't like, oh, that's it. The idea of how to get off of it was so much that I was like, I can't do this. Like, all the things come into your head. You can't, I'm not strong enough. I don't, and then all the excuses. And so it went on for probably 2 years, like a year and a half. And by the 2-year mark, I'm clean, So yeah, that's how it all. That's the story.
Well, thank God, and it's something you shouldn't feel ashamed of in any way. In this podcast, I have a segment that's called I Got a Story to Tell. And what I will tell the story is my mother's own prescription pain addiction. And so, because I used to be with her as a little girl when she would buy them off the street. And so I very much understand. She was a rape survivor, couldn't sleep. And so I very much understand exactly all the things that you're talking about, right now. So this period that you talk about where it seems like a very dark period in the scope of our country, in our history, what period was this for you? Like, what was going on?
In 2016, we find out Trump's elected. And, the first thing that happens is my son's teacher calls me to say he didn't turn in some stuff. And I lose it on him one day, like crying, had a whole breakdown. Because I was like, do you understand what's happening in the world? Like, you've got to be smart and you've got to go to school and you've got to do all the right things. And he's kind of looking at me like this lady has lost her mind. But that trauma that set in initially, that Trump had been elected, and the same day I'm getting a call from the teacher saying that you're not like performing, it really made me have like a mental breakdown that my son doesn't know how much his life is going to be under attack, right? And so that was the first sign that this situation had made me a little off. But then after that, we start working on the Women's March. And initially, off the bat, the attacks from like 50 different directions are coming at us. Like, we all came together and now we're planning this march. I have never been at the center of attacks from white supremacists in the way that it came at us. Like, how dare we as women even breathe, let alone think we were going to plan an occasion and a protest to take place the day after Trump's inauguration. That was like, hell no. Then we had the liberal, progressive white people who came to tell us, particularly men, that we didn't know how to plan a march of this magnitude and that we needed to hire them. And all of us women didn't know what we were doing. And so we were constantly dealing with those things. Then I had women who I was working with, which is probably one of the worst parts, that were, they had never been involved in any kind of movement stuff ever in their past. They just flocked and they were like, oh, that's it. Everybody, we want to march. We want to do something. And I was like, well, let's kind of deal with like, first of all, people with experience need to be, and they were like holding on to their state and their thing. I mean, it was all of this stuff happening, internal politics. And then learning how many of them did not know and had no real understanding of any kind of history. They didn't even believe that. I mean, I had a conversation with women who really, in fact, one of the co-founders of Women's March, Bob Bland, who's my dear sister, she asked me, like, what does women's right have to do with racism and all these issues related to the color of one's skin? And as soon as she asked me that question, I'm over there like, like, this is gonna...
You doing the Tina Turner chant.
It's gonna be hell, okay? And it was. She, at this point, and I can talk about it because she's now better than me at explaining and giving analysis for race relations as it relates to women's rights issues. But this came with a lot of teaching. And as you know, it's very tiring to have to spend going over and over and over and sharing with white people and particularly white women. So that was another part of it. But I will tell you that the worst part, the thing that hurt the most, was the idea that Black women were outraged. It was a really rough time for Black women who knew the threat of Trump. And now they saw white women converging to talk about doing a march. And they're like, wait a minute, 53% of y'all who voted actually put this man in office. So you need a march with your family, but don't ask us to be a part of it. And I had Black women who literally were either at me for even being involved and or trying their best to tell me not to be involved from their hearts. And so I always go through this thing of being like, I'm very proud of what we did with the Women's March, and I would do it again. But I also know that Black women tried to warn me that I was going into the lion's den.
Yeah, because that was going to be my question is like seeing all the things you went through, do you regret that you did it? And it sounds like you don't.
No, I don't regret that I did it because if we had not been at the center of the Women's March, all the issues from police accountability, having first of all, the biggest story that for me that's significant is where Lucia McBeth, who is now Congresswoman Lucia McBeth, the mother of Jordan Davis, who was killed in Florida by the white supremacists who said his music was too loud. She was there on the stage, and she made a determination that day that she was going to run for office. It was on the Women's March stage that she said, I can do this. And now, as I said, she's Congresswoman Lucia McBeth. So things like that, and there are many stories that we have of women who ran for office or different people who just sort of became out of the pride that they felt and the courage that they received from getting together and doing what we did that day. You can't take away from us that 5 million people around the world came together to stand against fascism and sexism and all the other isms, racism. And we did that. We did it. It took us a lot of pain. 98 pounds later, we actually produced one of the most significant days in American history. So yeah, certainly I'm proud of it and I would definitely do it again. But there's no doubt that the bruises, the battle scars are significant and they probably will be with me for the rest of my life.